The whispers started the moment Natalie Ashford stepped off the stagecoach in Julesburg, Colorado, her head full of dreams that seemed impossibly foolish in the dusty reality of 1876. She had traveled all the way from Philadelphia with one burning desire that set her apart from the other women making the journey west. She wanted true love, the kind written about in books, the kind that made your heart race and your soul sing. Most women came west for practicality, for land, for opportunity, or because they had nothing left back east. But Natalie came because she believed that somewhere in this wild, untamed country, there was a man who would love her the way she had always dreamed of being loved. The other women on the stagecoach had laughed at her when she confessed this during their long journey. They called her naive, foolish, a dreamer who would be crushed by the harsh realities of frontier life. One woman, a widow heading to Denver, had patted her hand condescendingly and said, "Child, love is a luxury. Out here you need survival. You need a man who can provide, who can protect. Romance is for storybooks, not for the West." But Natalie refused to believe it. At 22 years old, she had turned down 3 perfectly suitable marriage proposals back in Philadelphia because not one of them had made her heart flutter. Her family thought she was mad, throwing away security for something as intangible as romantic love. When her parents died within months of each other from influenza, leaving her with a small inheritance and no obligations, she made a decision that shocked everyone who knew her. She would go west and find what she was looking for. Julesburg was smaller than she had expected, a collection of wooden buildings lining a single main street with the South Platte River glinting in the distance. The town had grown up around the railroad, and the travelers passing through, a way station more than a destination. Natalie clutched her 2 cases and looked around, trying to orient herself. "You the new school teacher?" A sharp voice cut through her thoughts. A thin woman in her 50s approached, her face weathered by sun and hardship, her expression pinched with perpetual disapproval. "Yes, I am." Natalie Ashford. She extended her hand. The woman took it briefly, her grip dry and firm. "Margaret Hayes. I run the boarding house where you will be staying. The town council hired you, sight unseen, which I told them was foolish, but they were desperate. The last teacher ran off with a gambler." Natalie tried not to let her spirits sink. "I assure you I am committed to my position," Margaret snorted. "We shall see. Come along. Supper is at 6 sharp. You miss it, you go hungry." The boarding house was clean but spare, and Natalie's room was barely large enough for a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small trunk. She unpacked her few belongings and changed her travel dusty dress for a fresher one, then went down to supper. The dining room held 5 other boarders, all men who worked for the railroad or in the town's few businesses. They eyed her with various degrees of curiosity and interest that made her uncomfortable. Margaret served a simple meal of stew and bread, and the conversation was stilted. "So, Miss Ashford, what brings a refined lady like yourself to Julesburg?" one of the men asked. He was young, perhaps 25, with slicked back hair and a salesman's smile. "I came to teach," Natalie said simply. "But why here? A woman like you could find a teaching position anywhere." Natalie hesitated. She could hardly tell them the truth. "I wanted to see the West." "And what do you think so far?" another man asked, grinning. "I have only just arrived. I am sure I will find it quite interesting." "Interesting is one word for it," Margaret said dryly. "Hard is another. Dangerous is a third. I hope you are not one of those foolish girls who came west with romantic notions." The words stung because they were so close to the truth. Natalie lifted her chin. "I came west with realistic expectations and a desire to be useful." "Well, you will certainly be useful. We have 20 children in need of schooling, ages 6 to 15. The schoolhouse is in poor repair, and the supplies are limited. The pay is $30 a month, which barely covers room and board, but at least it is honest work. That night, lying in her narrow bed and listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the frontier town, Natalie wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. But then she thought of the alternative, a loveless marriage to some suitable Philadelphia gentleman, a life of quiet desperation and unfulfilled longing. No, she had made the right choice. She just had to be patient. The next morning, Natalie walked to the schoolhouse to survey her new domain. It was a simple wooden building with a pot-bellied stove, rough benches, and a battered desk. The windows were dirty and the floor needed sweeping, but it had potential. She spent the day cleaning and organizing, preparing for her students. Over the next weeks, Natalie threw herself into her work. The children were a mixed group, some eager to learn, others resentful of being kept from chores. She worked hard to make lessons engaging to reach each child where they were. Slowly, she began to win them over. But outside of school, her social life was limited and discouraging. Julesburg had few unmarried women, and those who were there viewed Natalie with suspicion. She was too educated, too refined, too different. The married women were cordial but distant. As for men, there was no shortage of attention, but it was the wrong kind. Men saw her as a pretty novelty, a potential wife who could cook and clean and bear children. When she tried to talk about books or ideas, their eyes glazed over. When she mentioned her belief in romantic love, they laughed. "Love," one cowboy said, guffawing. "Miss Ashford, love is what happens after 10 years of marriage when you have not killed each other yet. You do not start with it." "But why not?" she asked earnestly. "Why should not love be the foundation?" "Because it is not real," he said, still chuckling. "It is just something writers made up to sell books." She wanted to argue, to defend her beliefs, but she could see it was useless. These people had never experienced the kind of love she dreamed of, so they could not believe it existed. The mockery grew worse when a local rancher, a widower named Thomas Blake, began courting her with determined practicality. He was 45, weathered and blunt, and he approached marriage the way he approached buying cattle. "I need a wife," he told her over supper at the boarding house, Margaret beaming with approval nearby. "My kids need a mother, you need security, it is a fair trade." "But Mr. Blake, do you have any feelings for me?" Natalie asked carefully. He looked puzzled. "I respect you. You seem healthy and sensible. What more is there?" "Love," she said quietly. He actually laughed. "Miss Ashford, I am offering you a good home, financial security, and a respectable position. Love is a fairy tale. This is real life." When she gently refused him, the entire town seemed to turn against her. Margaret scolded her for foolishness. The other women whispered that she was too proud, too particular, that she would end up alone. The men stopped being respectful and started being crude, figuring that if she would not accept a good offer, she must be looking for something else entirely. "You are going to end up an old maid," Margaret told her one evening, her voice sharp with disapproval. "Thomas Blake is the best offer you will ever get out here. What are you waiting for? A prince on a white horse." "I am waiting for someone who loves me," Natalie said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Is that so wrong?" "It is foolish," Margaret snapped. "Love is not something you wait for. It is something that grows over time, from respect and partnership. You young girls with your romantic notions make me sick. This is the frontier, not a ballroom in Boston." Natalie felt tears prick her eyes but refused to let them fall. "I would rather be alone than settle for less than what I deserve." "Then alone you will be," Margaret said coldly. As winter approached, Natalie began to feel the weight of her isolation. The children still loved her, but their parents kept their distance. She had no friends, no confidants, no one to talk to about anything deeper than the weather. She began to wonder if everyone was right, if she had been foolish to come here, to believe that the kind of love she dreamed of could exist anywhere, much less in a rough frontier town. One cold November morning, she was walking to the schoolhouse when she heard shouting from the general store. She hurried over to see what was wrong and found the owner, Mr. Peterson, arguing with a man unlike anyone she had ever seen. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with shoulders so broad they seemed to fill the doorway. His hair was dark and long, pulled back with a leather tie, and his face was deeply tanned and lined with weather and experience. He wore buckskin clothing that had seen hard use, and there was a wildness about him that made Natalie think of wolves and mountains and places far from civilization. He looked to be in his late 20s, perhaps 30 at most, but his eyes held a depth that spoke of a much older soul. "I do not care what your policy is," the man was saying, his voice deep and rough with disuse. "I have pelts good quality. They are worth what I am asking." "Your pelts are fine, Otis, but I cannot give you the prices I used to," Mr. Peterson said nervously. "The market has changed. Beaver is not worth what it was." "You are cheating me," the mountain man said flatly. "You always have, but I let it go because I do not like trouble. But I know what beaver pelts are worth in Denver, and I know what you are offering, and the difference is too big to ignore." A crowd was gathering, sensing confrontation. Natalie watched, fascinated by the mountain man. There was something different about him, something that set him apart from the other rough men she had encountered. He was not posturing or threatening. He was simply stating facts, calm and unmovable as a mountain himself. Mr. Peterson's face flushed. "Are you calling me a thief?" "I am calling you a cheat," Otis O'Brien said calmly. "Which is what you are. Now you can give me a fair price or I can take my pelts to Denver myself. Your choice." "Now see here," Mr. Peterson blustered, but Natalie could see he was scared. This was not a man to push. Before the situation could escalate further, Natalie found herself stepping forward. "Excuse me, gentlemen. Perhaps I can help." Both men turned to look at her, surprised. Otis O'Brien's eyes met hers, and Natalie felt something shift inside her chest, like a door opening onto a vista she had never imagined. His eyes were the color of pine trees, deep green with flecks of gold, and they held an intelligence and intensity that took her breath away. "How can you help, Miss Ashford?" Mr. Peterson asked irritably. "I grew up in Philadelphia, where my father was a merchant," Natalie said, thinking quickly. "I learned accounting and trade values. Perhaps I could assess the pelts and help you reach a fair agreement." Mr. Peterson looked ready to refuse, but some of the watching townspeople murmured approval. He was trapped by his own reputation for fairness. "Fine," he said stiffly. "Come look at them." Natalie had no idea what beaver pelts were actually worth, but she knew how to do research. "May I borrow your catalogs and price books from Denver and St. Louis?" she asked Mr. Peterson sweetly. He could not refuse without looking like he had something to hide. Grumbling, he produced the books. Natalie studied them carefully, calculating while everyone waited. The mountain man stood silent and still, watching her with those remarkable eyes. Finally, she looked up. "Based on the current market prices and the quality of these pelts, which are indeed excellent, a fair price would be $75 for the lot." Mr. Peterson had offered 40. He went red in the face. "That is highway robbery." "That is fair market value," Natalie said calmly. "Less than you would pay in Denver because you saved the shipping, but more than you offered because these pelts are superior quality." The watching crowd murmured. Otis O'Brien's expression did not change, but something warmed in his eyes. Mr. Peterson saw he was beaten. Cursing under his breath, he counted out $75 in coin and bills. The mountain man took it without gloating. nodded to Natalie, and walked out. Natalie returned to her walk to the schoolhouse, her heart beating strangely fast. She told herself it was just the excitement of the confrontation, but she knew it was more than that. Something about that man had struck a chord deep inside her. That evening, as she was leaving the schoolhouse after preparing the next day's lessons, she found Otis O'Brien waiting outside. Up close, he was even more imposing, but not frightening. There was a gentleness in his eyes that belied his fierce appearance. "Miss Ashford," he said, his voice low and careful as if he was not used to talking much. "I wanted to thank you for your help today. Peterson has been cheating me for years, but I did not know how to prove it. You are welcome, Mr. O'Brien. It was only fair. How did you know my name?" "I heard Mr. Peterson use it." He nodded slowly. "You are the new school teacher. People talk about you." "I imagine they do," Natalie said with a rueful smile. "I seem to be a source of much speculation and disappointment. Disappointment. I turned down a marriage proposal from Thomas Blake. Apparently that makes me foolish and proud." Otis O'Brien's expression darkened. "Blake is a hard man. His first wife died young, worked to death. You were wise to refuse him." "The town does not see it that way. They think I am waiting for something that does not exist." "What are you waiting for?" The question was so direct, so genuine, that Natalie found herself answering honestly. "Love. Real love, the kind that makes two people better together than they were apart. The kind where you choose each other every day, not out of obligation but out of joy. Everyone says it is foolish to believe in such things, especially out here." She expected him to laugh or dismiss her words like everyone else. Instead, he was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. "It is not foolish," he said finally. "It is rare, maybe, hard to find, but not foolish. Anything worth having is worth waiting for." Natalie felt tears spring to her eyes. After months of mockery and dismissal, someone finally understood. "You truly believe that?" "I do." He shifted, looking uncomfortable. "I came down from the mountains because winter is setting in. I have a cabin up in the high country, but I usually spend winters in Denver. This year, I thought I would try Julesburg, see if it suited me. Now I am thinking it might." "Because of the trading opportunities?" Natalie asked, though her heart hoped for a different answer. "Because of you," he said simply. "If you would be willing, I would like to call on you properly, get to know you." Joy flooded through her, but caution followed quickly. "I should warn you, Mr. O'Brien, that the town already disapproves of me. If you court me, you will face the same disapproval." A small smile crossed his weathered face, transforming it. "Miss Ashford, I have lived alone in the mountains for 8 years. I trap beaver and hunt elk and go months without seeing another human soul. Do you really think I care what the people of Julesburg think of me?" Natalie laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. "Then yes, Mr. O'Brien, I would be happy for you to call on me." "Otis," he said. "My name is Otis." "Natalie," she replied, smiling. Over the following weeks, Otis O'Brien became a regular presence in Natalie's life, and the town had plenty to say about it. Margaret Hayes was scandalized that Natalie would entertain the attentions of a mountain man, someone she considered barely civilized. The other women whispered that Natalie was making an even worse choice than refusing Thomas Blake. At least Blake was established, respectable. What was Otis O'Brien? A wild man who lived like an animal in the mountains. But Natalie did not care. For the first time since arriving in Julesburg, she was happy. Otis called on her 3 evenings a week, sitting in the boarding house parlor under Margaret's disapproving eye. They talked for hours, and Natalie discovered a man of surprising depth and intelligence. He had been a professor's son from St. Louis, educated and refined, until tragedy struck. His parents and younger sister had died in a cholera outbreak when he was 22. Grief-stricken and unable to bear the memories, he had fled to the mountains, seeking solitude and peace. "I thought I wanted to be alone forever," he told her one evening, his deep voice quiet. "I thought civilization had nothing left to offer me. But then I saw you standing in that general store, so fierce and certain, defending a stranger against unfairness. And I thought, maybe there is still something worth coming down from the mountain for." "I was terrified," Natalie admitted. "I had no idea what those pelts were worth. I just knew Mr. Peterson was cheating you, and it made me angry." "You hid your fear well." His eyes were warm on her face. "You are brave, Natalie. Braver than you know. Coming out here alone, holding on to your dreams even when everyone mocked you for them. That takes real courage." "I was starting to think they were right," she confessed. "That I was foolish to believe in love, that I should just accept a practical arrangement and be grateful for it." "Never settle," Otis said fiercely. "Never make yourself smaller to fit into someone else's idea of what you should be. You are perfect as you are." Natalie felt her heart swell. This was what she had been searching for, this connection, this understanding. Otis did not want to change her or diminish her dreams. He celebrated them. As autumn turned to winter, their courtship deepened. Otis began attending church services, sitting in the back pew and enduring the stares and whispers just to walk Natalie home afterward. He came to the school's Christmas program and watched with quiet pride as Natalie's students performed. He bought her small gifts, a hair ribbon in her favorite blue, a book of poetry he thought she would enjoy, a pair of warm gloves lined with rabbit fur he had tanned himself. In return, Natalie brought civilization gently back into his life. She encouraged him to talk about his family, to remember the good times before the tragedy. She taught him new card games and read to him from her favorite novels. She helped him see that he could honor his lost loved ones while still choosing to live fully. "They would not want you to hide away forever," she told him one snowy evening. "They would want you to be happy." "I know," he said. "I think I have always known. I just needed a reason to come back to the world. You are that reason, Natalie." The town's disapproval reached a crescendo when Thomas Blake confronted Otis outside the general store in late December. A crowd gathered quickly, sensing drama. "You have turned her head with your wild ways," Blake accused, his face red with anger and wounded pride. "She was a sensible woman until you came along." "She is still a sensible woman," Otis said calmly. "She just has different sense than you approve of. You live in a cabin in the mountains like an animal. What kind of life can you offer her? I have a ranch, a real house, security." "What do you have?" Otis was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was clear and carrying, meant for everyone to hear. "I have love for her. Real, deep, true love. I have respect for her mind and her spirit. I have a desire to make her happy every day of my life. Can you say the same, Blake?" Thomas Blake sputtered, unable to answer. The crowd was silent. "I thought not," Otis continued. "You want a housekeeper and a mother for your children. That is not the same as wanting a wife, a partner, a beloved. Natalie deserves more than you are offering. She deserves everything she dreams of, and by God, I am going to spend my life trying to give it to her." Natalie, who had arrived at the edge of the crowd, felt tears streaming down her face. No one had ever defended her like this, had ever proclaimed their love for her so publicly and beautifully. She pushed through the crowd and went straight to Otis. "I love you," she said clearly, not caring who heard. "I love you, Otis O'Brien, and I do not care what anyone thinks about it." He pulled her into his arms right there on the main street of Julesburg, Colorado, and kissed her in front of God and everyone. The crowd gasped and murmured, but Natalie did not hear them. She was lost in the kiss, in the feeling of being exactly where she belonged. When they finally pulled apart, Otis looked down at her with such tenderness it made her heart ache. "Marry me, Natalie. Be my wife. I know I do not have much to offer in terms of material things, but I promise you will never doubt my love for a single moment." "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, yes, yes." Margaret Hayes threw her out of the boarding house that very evening. "I will not harbor a woman of such low standards under my roof," she announced self-righteously. Otis arranged for Natalie to stay with the Garcias, a Mexican family who ran a small restaurant on the edge of town. Maria Garcia was a warm, motherly woman who thought the whole romance was beautiful and was happy to provide a respectable room for the schoolteacher until her wedding. They were married 2 weeks later, in early January of 1877, in the small church in Julesburg. Natalie wore a simple blue dress, and Otis wore new clothes purchased specially for the occasion. Only a handful of people attended: the Garcias, a few of Natalie's students and their families, and the minister. But Natalie did not care about the small attendance or the town's disapproval. As she stood before the minister and pledged her life to Otis, as he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger and promised to love her until his last breath, she knew she had found exactly what she had come west looking for. The wedding night was spent in the town's only hotel, a luxury Otis insisted on. He was gentle and patient with her inexperience, and Natalie discovered that the physical expression of love was just as beautiful as she had imagined when given with true feeling. "I never knew it could be like this," she whispered in the darkness, wrapped in his arms. "Like what?" His voice rumbled in his chest beneath her ear. "So perfect, so right, like two pieces fitting together exactly as they were meant to." "That is what it is," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her hair. "That is what we are, two pieces of the same whole finally found." The next day they began the journey to Otis's mountain cabin. It was a 3-day ride through increasingly wild terrain, and Natalie loved every moment of it. She had never seen country so beautiful, so vast and untamed. Mountains rose up like cathedral spires, pine forests stretched endlessly, and the air was so clean and cold it hurt to breathe. The cabin, when they finally reached it, was more substantial than Natalie had expected. Otis had built it himself over several years, and it was solid and weathertight, with a stone fireplace and real glass windows. It was a single large room with a sleeping loft, simple but well made. "I know it is not much," Otis said, looking uncertain. "Nothing like what you are used to. But we can make improvements. I can add another room, make it more comfortable for you." Natalie looked around the cabin, at the sturdy furniture Otis had crafted with his own hands, at the furs and blankets that would keep them warm, at the shelves waiting for her books, at the wide windows that looked out on a view of mountains and sky that took her breath away. "It is perfect," she said sincerely. "Otis, it is absolutely perfect. This will be our home where we build our life together. I could not ask for anything better." The relief and joy on his face made her love him even more. He swept her up in his arms and carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing. That first winter in the mountains was the happiest time of Natalie's life. The snow piled high around the cabin, and for weeks at a time they were completely isolated from the outside world. But Natalie did not mind. She had everything she needed right there with her. During the long winter days, Otis taught her mountain skills: how to snowshoe, how to ice fish, how to read weather signs and animal tracks. Natalie taught him things too: complex mathematics that fascinated him, literature and poetry, philosophy and history. In the evenings, they sat by the fire and talked for hours, or read aloud to each other, or simply sat in comfortable silence. And at night, they made love with a passion and tenderness that deepened with each passing day. Natalie had never imagined that physical intimacy could be so profound, so connecting. Every time Otis touched her, she felt cherished and adored. "I love you more every day," he told her one snowy night, his hand gentle on her face. "I did not think it was possible to love someone as much as I love you, and yet every morning I wake up and find my love has grown." "I feel the same," Natalie whispered. "You are everything I dreamed of and so much more. You make me feel seen and valued and cherished. You make me feel like the best version of myself." "You are the best version of yourself," Otis said seriously. "You always were. I just get to appreciate it." Spring came late to the high country, but when it finally arrived, it was glorious. The snow melted, revealing meadows of wildflowers. Animals emerged from winter dens. The world felt new and full of possibility. Natalie discovered she was pregnant in April. She had suspected for a few weeks but had not said anything, wanting to be sure. When she finally told Otis, he looked stunned, then overjoyed, then terrified. "Are you well? Do you feel all right? Should we go down to Julesburg to see a doctor?" Natalie laughed at his panic. "I am fine, my love. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am strong and healthy. We will be fine." But Otis insisted on making preparations. He made the cabin even more comfortable, adding a proper bedroom and improving the kitchen. He laid in extra supplies. He talked to Maria Garcia on their next trip to town and got the names of a midwife in Denver. "I am not taking any chances with you or the baby," he said stubbornly. "When your time comes, we are going to Denver where there is proper help." Natalie knew better than to argue. His fierce protectiveness touched her deeply. That summer was busy and productive. Otis trapped and hunted while Natalie tended a garden she had planted near the cabin. They made trips down to Julesburg and Denver to trade and gather supplies. The people of Julesburg remained cool toward them, but Natalie found she did not care anymore. Their disapproval could not touch the happiness she had found. In Denver, they made friends with a few other mountain families and traders. Natalie was delighted to meet other women who had chosen similar lives, who understood the appeal of the wild country and the deep satisfaction of building a life with someone you truly loved. As her pregnancy advanced, Natalie remained active and healthy. Otis watched her like a hawk, but she thrived on the mountain life. The fresh air and good food and physical activity agreed with her. She had never felt stronger. In late October, when the first snows were threatening, they traveled to Denver and took rooms near the midwife. Otis was taking no chances. He stayed close to her constantly, his anxiety increasing as her due date approached. "You are driving me to distraction," Natalie finally told him, amused. "I am not made of glass. I am not going to break." "I know," he said, looking miserable. "I just cannot help worrying. What if something goes wrong? What if I lose you?" She took his face in her hands, making him look at her. "Nothing is going to go wrong. I am strong, the baby is strong, and we have excellent help. Have faith, my love." Their son was born on a cold November morning in 1877, after a labor that was difficult but not dangerous. Otis held Natalie's hand through it all, whispering encouragement and love. When the midwife finally placed the squalling baby in Natalie's arms, Otis wept openly. "A son," he said wonderingly. "We have a son." They named him Samuel after Otis's father. He was healthy and strong, with his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. Natalie fell in love with him instantly, overwhelmed by the fierce protective tenderness she felt. Otis was a devoted father from the first moment. He held Samuel with such gentleness, such awe, that it made Natalie's heart overflow. Watching her strong, capable husband cradle their tiny son and sing lullabies in his deep voice was a joy beyond measure. They spent the winter in Denver, giving Natalie time to recover and Samuel time to grow stronger before making the journey back to the mountains. It was a good time, peaceful and happy. Otis found work as a hunting guide, and they made more friends in the small community of mountain people who wintered in Denver in the spring. They returned to their cabin. Samuel was 5 months old, healthy and thriving. The cabin felt like home in a way it never had before, filled now with baby sounds and the warmth of family. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Natalie cared for Samuel and maintained the cabin and garden while Otis trapped and hunted. They worked together seamlessly, partners in every sense. Samuel grew from baby to toddler, learning to walk on chubby legs in the meadow outside the cabin, learning to talk with words for Mama and Papa, and the animals and plants around him. When Samuel was 2, Natalie became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier and the birth, though still painful, was quicker. Their daughter was born in the cabin with Maria Garcia attending as midwife, having traveled up specifically for the occasion. A girl, Maria announced joyfully. A beautiful baby girl. They named her Rose, and she was indeed beautiful, with Otis's green eyes and Natalie's delicate features. Samuel was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to hold her and help care for her constantly. The years flowed by like the river that ran near their cabin, each season bringing its own joys and challenges. Samuel grew into a strong, curious boy who loved the mountains as much as his father did. Rose was gentler, more contemplative, with her mother's love of books and learning. Natalie taught both children to read and write and do mathematics, giving them the education she would have provided in a schoolhouse. Otis taught them wilderness skills, how to track and hunt and survive in the wild country. Together, they raised children who were intelligent, capable, and kind. The town of Julesburg remained a necessary evil for trading and supplies, but the O'Briens found their real community among the other mountain families and in Denver. These were people who understood their choices, who did not mock dreams or dismiss love. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Otis gave Natalie a locket with small paintings of Samuel and Rose inside. "I wanted you to have something to remind you," he said. "Remind me of what?" Natalie asked, touched by the gift. "That your dreams came true, that love like you imagined does exist. That you were right to wait for it, to believe in it." Natalie felt tears spring to her eyes. "I never doubt it, my love, not for a single moment. Every day with you is proof that I was right to hold onto my dreams." "I am the one who should be thanking you," Otis said seriously. "You brought me back to life, Natalie. I was just existing before you, just surviving. You taught me how to live again, how to love again. You gave me everything." They held each other close, their children playing nearby, the mountain wind sighing through the pines. It was a perfect moment, one of thousands they had shared and would share. When Samuel was 8 and Rose was 6, Natalie became pregnant once more. This pregnancy was harder than the previous 2. She was 30 now, and her body did not bounce back as easily. But she was still strong and healthy, and when their second daughter was born in the spring of 1884, Natalie felt nothing but joy. They named her Lily, and she completed their family. 3 healthy, happy children who filled the cabin with laughter and noise and endless love. As the children grew older, the family began spending winters in Denver so Samuel and Rose could attend proper school and have friends their own age. Otis built them a small house there, simple but comfortable. They spent springs, summers, and autumns in the mountains and winters in the city, giving the children the best of both worlds. The people of Julesburg eventually stopped talking about the scandalous mountain man and the foolish schoolteacher. New scandals, new stories took their place. When the O'Briens did pass through town, People nodded politely, and some even admitted that the marriage seemed to have worked out well. Margaret Hayes, grown older and somewhat mellower, even apologized to Natalie one day. "I was wrong about you," she said stiffly. "You knew what you wanted and you were brave enough to wait for it. I respect that, even if I did not at the time." "Thank you, Margaret," Natalie said graciously. "I hold no ill will. You were looking out for me in your own way." As the years passed and the children became young adults themselves, Natalie often reflected on her journey. She thought about the young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Julesburg all those years ago, full of dreams that everyone said were foolish. She had been right to hold onto those dreams. She had been right to believe that love, real love, was worth waiting for. And she had been blessed beyond measure to find it with Otis. Samuel grew into a man much like his father, strong, capable, thoughtful. He chose to become a hunting guide, spending his time in the wild country he loved. Rose became a teacher like her mother, opening a small school in Denver for children whose families could not afford regular tuition. Lily, the youngest, showed a talent for art and studied painting in St. Louis. All three children grew up knowing they were deeply loved, that their parents chose each other every day with joy and commitment. They grew up seeing what real partnership looked like, what true love meant. It shaped them into people who would not settle for less in their own lives. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Otis and Natalie sat on the porch of their mountain cabin watching the sunset paint the peaks pink and gold. Their children were grown and following their own paths, but they visited often, bringing grandchildren now for Otis and Natalie to spoil. "Do you have any regrets?" Otis asked quietly, his hand warm around hers. "Not a single one," Natalie said honestly. "This life we have built, this love we have shared, it is more than I ever dreamed. You made every dream come true, Otis, every single one." "You did the same for me," he replied. "I did not even know what I was dreaming of until I met you. You woke me up, brought me back to life. Everything good in my life started the day you defended me to Peterson in that general store." Natalie laughed, remembering. "I was so scared. I had no idea what I was doing." "You were magnificent," Otis said. "You are still magnificent. After 20 years, you still take my breath away." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere an owl hooted and the wind whispered through the pines. It was a sound Natalie had come to love, the voice of the wild country that had become her home. "I am glad I came west," she said softly. "I am glad I did not listen to all those people who said I was foolish. I am glad I believed that what I was looking for existed, even when everyone mocked me for it." "So am I," Otis said, pulling her close. "So am I, my love." The years continued to pass gently for Otis and Natalie O'Brien. They remained in excellent health, their bodies kept strong by the active mountain life. They divided their time between the cabin and Denver, enjoying both the solitude of the wilderness and the company of their growing family. Samuel married a woman named Catherine, a doctor's daughter from Denver who loved the mountains as much as he did. They had 4 children and built a cabin not far from Otis and Natalie's, continuing the family tradition. Rose married a fellow teacher, and they had 2 children and a house full of books in Denver. Lily married an artist from St. Louis, and they split their time between the city and regular visits to Colorado. Otis and Natalie became the heart of a large, loving family. Their cabin was often filled with children and grandchildren, with laughter and stories and love. They taught their grandchildren the same lessons they had taught their children: to believe in love, to wait for what was worth having, to never settle for less than what made their hearts sing. On quiet evenings when they were alone again, Otis and Natalie would sit by the fire as they had done for decades, talking about everything and nothing. Their love had deepened and matured over the years, growing stronger and richer with time. "I still fall in love with you every day," Otis told her on their 30th anniversary. "Every single day, I look at you and think how lucky I am." "I feel the same," Natalie said, her hair now streaked with silver but her eyes still bright with the dreams that had brought her west. "You were worth waiting for, worth believing in. You were worth every moment of mockery and doubt." They made love that night with the same passion and tenderness they had shared since their wedding night, proving that true love does not diminish with age but only grows deeper and more profound. As they moved into their 60s, Otis and Natalie finally spent more time in Denver than in the mountains. The high country winters were harder on their aging bodies, though they still made the journey up to the cabin every spring and spent the warm months there. The cabin had become a gathering place for the family, a touchstone of their shared history. Every summer, children and grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren would come to visit, to hear stories of how grandmother Natalie had come west looking for love and grandfather Otis had come down from the mountain to find it. The story of their romance became family legend, passed down through generations. It was a story of courage and belief, of two people who refused to settle for anything less than true love and were rewarded beyond measure. When Natalie was 65, she was invited back to Julesburg to speak at the dedication of a new school building. She was surprised by the invitation, but decided to accept. Otis accompanied her, of course, as he had accompanied her through life for nearly 40 years. Julesburg had grown and changed since Natalie's days as schoolteacher. The rough frontier town had become a more settled community. Many of the people who had mocked her were gone, dead, or moved on. But some remained, and they came to the dedication to see the woman they had once dismissed. Natalie gave a short speech about the importance of education and the courage to pursue one's dreams. When she finished, an elderly woman approached her. It took Natalie a moment to recognize Maria Garcia, now well into her 80s. "Natalie," Maria said warmly, embracing her. "You are still as beautiful as ever, and you, Otis, still strong as a bear." They spent a happy hour catching up, reminiscing about old times. Before they left, several other people came to speak to them. They were former students of Natalie's, now middle-aged with children of their own. "You taught us more than reading and writing, Miss Ashford," one woman said. "I mean, Mrs. O'Brien, you taught us to believe in ourselves, to hold on to our dreams. I never forgot that." "You showed us what real love looked like," a man added. "The way you and Mr. O'Brien stood up to the whole town for each other. That stayed with me my whole life." Natalie was deeply touched. She had not realized that her story had meant something to others, that her choice to wait for love and her happiness in finding it had been a lesson for those watching. As they left Julesburg for the last time, Natalie looked back at the town that had once been so hostile to her dreams. "I am glad I came back," she said to Otis. "I am glad to know that our story meant something, that maybe it helped others believe in love too." "Our story is not over yet," Otis said with a smile. "We have a lot of living left to do," and they did. They lived another 15 years together, healthy and happy, surrounded by the family they had created and the love they had nurtured. Their marriage remained strong and joyful until the very end. Otis passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, with Natalie holding his hand. His last words to her were, "I love you. I have loved you every moment since I first saw you. Thank you for making my life beautiful." Natalie mourned him deeply, but without regret. They had had nearly 45 years together, years full of love and joy and partnership. She knew how rare that was, how precious. She lived another 3 years after Otis died, spending her time with her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling stories of the love she had found and the life she had built. She remained in the Denver house, but every spring she visited the mountain cabin one last time, sitting on the porch and remembering all the beautiful moments she and Otis had shared there. When Natalie passed away at the age of 80, she was surrounded by family. Her last words were about Otis, about the love that had defined her life. "I am coming, my love," she whispered. "Wait for me." They buried her next to Otis in a small cemetery in Denver with a view of the mountains they had both loved. Their children arranged for a simple monument that read, "Otis and Natalie O'Brien. They believed in love and made every dream come true." The story of Natalie and Otis became a treasured family history, passed down through generations. Their descendants grew and spread across the West, but they all knew the story of the schoolteacher who came west looking for love and the mountain man who came down from the high country to give it to her. It became a story about courage and belief, about refusing to settle for less than what your heart knows is right. It became a story about how true love does exist, how it is worth waiting for, how it can transform lives and create legacies that last for generations. The cabin in the mountains remained in the family, preserved and cared for by Samuel's descendants. Every summer, the O'Brien clan would gather there for a reunion, and the oldest members would tell the story once again to the youngest, making sure it was never forgotten. They told how the town had mocked Natalie's dreams, how everyone said she was foolish to believe in romantic love, to wait for something more than a practical arrangement. They told how Otis had seen her fierce courage and fallen in love, how he had defended her publicly and promised to make every dream come true. And they told how that promise had been kept, how Natalie and Otis had built a life of deep love and genuine partnership that had blessed everyone who knew them. The story became a touchstone for the family, a reminder of what was possible when you had the courage to believe in your dreams and the strength to wait for what was truly worth having. Young people facing decisions about love and marriage would think of Natalie and Otis and ask themselves, "Am I settling? Or am I choosing the kind of love that will make every dream come true?" More often than not, inspired by their ancestors' example, they chose to wait to believe, to hold out for the real thing. And more often than not, they found it, creating their own stories of love and courage that added to the family legacy. The mountain cabin stood for over 100 years, a testament to Otis's skill as a builder and his family's devotion to preserving his memory. Inside, carefully protected, were artifacts of Natalie and Otis's life together. Her teaching books, his trapping equipment, the locket he had given her on their 5th anniversary, love letters they had written during their brief separations, journals where Natalie had recorded her thoughts and feelings about her life in the mountains. These items became precious family heirlooms, tangible connections to a love story that had started more than a century before, but continued to inspire and guide the descendants of that brave schoolteacher and that gentle mountain man. The legacy of Natalie and Otis O'Brien was not just in the large family they created or the values they passed down. It was in the proof they offered that dreams are not foolish, that waiting for true love is not naive, that the kind of partnership described in books and poems can exist in real life. They lived it and showed others it was possible. In a world that often mocked romance and dismissed dreams, Natalie and Otis had stood firm in their belief that love was real and worth everything. And in doing so, they created a life so rich and full and joyful that it blessed not only themselves but generations of descendants who carried their legacy forward. Their story was simple in many ways. Two people met, fell in love, married, and lived happily together until death parted them. But the simplicity held profound truth. Real love does exist. It is worth waiting for. It is worth believing in. And when you find it, when you choose it and nurture it and protect it, it can make every dream come true. That was the lesson of Natalie and Otis O'Brien, the school teacher who refused to settle, and the mountain man who came down from his solitude to love her. It was a lesson written in the life they built together, in the family they raised, in the love that lasted until their final breaths and beyond into memory and legacy. They had been right to believe in love. They had been right to wait for each other. They had been right to choose the difficult path of holding on to their dreams even when everyone around them said those dreams were foolish. And in the end, they proved that the mockers were wrong and the dreamers were right. Love like theirs did exist. It was rare and precious and required courage to find and keep. But it was real, and it was glorious, and it was worth everything they had to sacrifice to have it. That was the final truth of their story, the truth that echoed down through generations. Dreams of love are not foolish. They are the wisest dreams of all. And sometimes, if you are very brave and very patient, a mountain man will come down from the high country and make every single one of those dreams come true.